Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. Hey, we're getting to the end of July, so that means it's Pac-12 Media Day. Shane and I will recap what we heard from Jed and Jayden earlier. Plus, we have a great guest on the show today that Shane and I had a chance to speak to a little bit earlier. Pat Crakes, who is he's a television programming executive, former television programming executive, does some consulting now. Good friends with our buddy Corey Leff, aka John Wall Street. He's going to really dive in deep to the Pac-12 TV negotiations. You're going to be going to class. Like I say with Matt Moreno, the professor, Shane, I feel like we went to class a little bit earlier today when we spoke to Pat.
Well, for listeners and viewers on our YouTube page who we talk about Pac-12 media rights, you might nod along like, yeah, that makes sense. You actually get some information here, like on, okay, how would we add in a couple more teams, a couple more programs to the Pac-12? How would that work? Is basketball a factor at all? And a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, like how do media rights deals actually work? This guy actually has some answers because he's lived it. And so I learned a lot. Hopefully you will too. And looking forward to you all hearing that conversation in a little bit.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting with Pat, and we other random things we'll talk about today. Listen, it's a summer show. It's a Friday that when we're recording this. So, hey, we appreciate you listening. But as always, this is time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, you'll see Shane drinking out of his Ice Shaker, and you can get one similar to that by going to iceshaker.com using promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, or finding one at fanatics.com. All right, Shane, number one, Arizona was picked 8th among all teams in the Pac-12. Is this a fair ranking? Buy or sell?
I have to buy it as much as I get excited to hate on media rankings because they really, the preseason stuff doesn't mean anything. It's just like the all Pac-12 first team, second team. Jacob Cowan was second team, Dorian Singer was first team. We could debate that too. This doesn't mean much, but if I were to rank them myself, I think that's about right. I think I'll buy number 8. As much as my initial reaction is like, what? This team is on the rise. They went 5-7 last year. They're going to be better this year. Well, you look at the teams in front of them. First of all, to me, the top 4, I think they got right, and not necessarily in the order, but USC, Washington, Oregon, Utah. Yeah. Even if Arizona has a great year, I think their ceiling is probably still below those teams, and then maybe Oregon State as well. After that, there's a little bit of wiggle room. You could say Washington State, Arizona may find a way past them. Maybe UCLA, which has a new quarterback. So I think it's about right, unfortunately, and the teams below them. Cal and Stanford, absolutely. I think they should be ranked ahead of. ASU and Colorado, to me, are big wild cards because both teams are going to look so different, which means there's probably going to be a bit of a learning curve, some growing pains for those teams. But if they landed some stars, you never know. They could be better than expected. So I think 8 is about right because, like I said a million times, and I'll say it for the million and first time, I think Arizona got better. Jed Fish even said during the Pac-12 Media Day, his interview, that he thinks this team is the best one he's had, and I agree. But I think the rest of the Pac-12 collectively improved as well. You factor that in with Arizona's conference or their non-conference and their conference schedule. This is an odd-numbered year, so they have to play ASU on the road, which means 5 Pac-12 road games instead of 4. I think number 8 is about right.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think it comes down to a few things for this ranking. Number one is what have you done for me lately? And the fact that Arizona hasn't really had a winning season since Rich Rod was there, 2017, I believe. It's been a long time. So, they're actually 8th is probably better than Arizona's been ranked in quite a while. Number 2 is the schedule, as you mentioned. And the tough road games, the tough games are generally at home. And the road games, it's never easy to win on the road.
Very few gimmies
USC,
this year.
Obviously. Yeah. But Washington at home, Utah at home, those are 2 of the top 4 teams. They don't play Oregon. They're at USC, which, Arizona hasn't beaten USC since 2012 when they made T-shirts and put them in the bookstore. I don't think that's going to happen this year. Unfortunately, I should have bought one of those T-shirts back in the day because knowing that Arizona may never beat USC again.
Knowing what you know now.
Yeah, knowing what I know now, it's kind of a bummer. So with that said, and also the fact that the conference is stronger. It's a very good conference that we have here. Up front with USC especially leading the way. So who knows what to expect? I think those top 4, as you said, are in a class by themselves. All right, number 2, Shane. So Jed and Jayden de Laura spoke. I guess Jayden read a prepared statement regarding his Hawaii case. I know a lot of people were surprised that Jayden was even invited to be Arizona's offensive representative today. Buy or sell that you felt that their comments were sufficient?
A couple of things to start. Number one, if you want to learn more about that case, we talked to Lynn Kawano, who sort of broke the case in Hawaii a few weeks ago. We just did one episode about that situation, and then we said, okay, that's enough. But if you want to check that out and learn more about that situation, that's a good listen/view. And then I was a little surprised that Jayden de Laura was a representative for that reason, but he's going to have to talk about it eventually. So I actually applaud him for doing that. As far as what both men said, to me, I'll buy that what they said was enough for me. Jed Fish basically said, I think what we had talked about already was that this is and he emphasized it's a civil case and a juvenile case. And he also said, we can't act on things we don't know, which is, a lot of things are sealed with the juvenile situation. So he was not charged criminally with anything, and they're moving on. I think that's fair. That's a fair standpoint. So I was fine with what he said. Jayden had his prepared statement. He said basically he wasn't able to say a lot else legally for legal reasons, which is probably true. He did say that he essentially said he wishes he could defend himself a little bit more, and he wants to thank people for correcting misinformation. So you kind of got the gist of where he's at, and he was very emotional about it. So as far as I'm concerned, I actually agree with Jed that we can only act on what we know. And the fact is we don't know a lot about this situation. And so for me, it was enough to move on. I think that what both men said was perfectly sufficient. Was
it, in your opinion, the right decision to bring Jayden to Media Day?
I liked it. I did, because, he's going to have to talk to the press one way or the other.
Right. You might as well get it out of the way all at once. And now you're not going to have to sit in post game unless anything else comes out. You're not going to have to sit in post-game media sessions. Hey, so you beat USC tonight. So tell us about this case. He's out of the way. All the media has gotten past.
So rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah. And look, there's a way, like, as a former media guy, there's other ways you can sort of broach the topic. Like, how have you dealt with these distractions? What has been your reaction from your teammates? Those are all fair game. If he wants to answer them, he certainly can. But yeah, I actually applaud him for going and being part of Media Day. Jed could have held him back, or Jayden could have said, look, I don't want to have to deal with this, but he did it. He got it. It's done. And again, it's tough for us as fans because it's hard to know exactly where the truth lies. Did he settle the situation just to get it over with? What were he and his former teammate really guilty of these things? It's impossible to say. And maybe I don't like saying that because it sounds like an excuse for us just to move on, but it's where we're at. And so, like I said, you and I did a whole episode on this. A lot of fans were like, I don't even want to, let's just move on. Let's not deal with this. I consider it settled from that perspective. And I think Jed and Jayden do too.
Yeah. I completely understand why they did it. At first you were kind of like, what are they thinking? But it makes sense. So I will give them some credit there. All right. I just want to kind of a bonus question here, Shane. So Deion Sanders is the one coach that skipped Media Day. Mm-hmm. It feels like, he could have probably scheduled a follow-up surgery at another time. It feels like this is planned. I have this feeling that Colorado is in for a total disaster. Maybe not right away, but in due time. Do you feel similar to that?
I'm not sure. First of all, I think your point about Deion Sanders missing Media Day, I think Deion thinks that he's bigger than all of this.
I agree with that.
I think that he's like, I have more important things to do than talk to regional media because he's Coach Prime. I don't know if you saw the media release about who all the coaches who were going to, at least originally going to be there, and it actually said in the media release, Deion Coach Prime Sanders, like in quotes. So
yeah,
here's the thing: is that winning cures everything. And if Colorado wins this year or next year, then all's going to be well.
What do they win, though, Shane? What is winning? Is 8 games enough for all this circus?
The bar might be higher just because he is Deion Sanders and he has set that expectation. I think realistically, for those who have followed Colorado football, I think 3 or 4 wins in year one would be a big step, and then maybe 4 or 5 wins the following year. But from a national perspective, I think there's going to be a lot more criticism, and I think the circus has already descended on Boulder. It's going to be like that all year, and it's going to be like that as long as Deion Sanders is the head coach there. So again, I think you and I agree that either way, Deion Sanders isn't going to be at Colorado for very long. I really have no idea how well they're going to do. I mean, he did well at his last stop, but it was a different situation. So
yeah, but I mean, he was able to recruit because of his name.
Yeah,
against nobodies. Now he got a big time player in Travis Hunter, who then followed him to Colorado, and he got his son, who was a top quarterback prospect. But this to me feels like disaster waiting to happen. Here's the thing. So he's either going to win early and get out of there quickly, or he's going to lose and he's going to get quickly. So mad, right? And get out of it. Like, this feels like if you rip a wound open on your arm and you put a Band-Aid on it when you need stitches.
Yeah.
You want to build, to ASU's credit, Shane, they hired Kenny Dillingham saying this is a better long-term fit. And just like Arizona did with Jedd Fisch, you're not trying to hire the big name.
Yep.
And we didn't understand that right away. But now I get it. You're hiring a program builder. Is Deion Sanders a program builder? Absolutely not.
I don't think it's
the transfer portal era.
I don't think it's going to end well for Colorado. I think there could be a good year or two in there where they finish above 500, go to a bowl game, and everything feels good. But I think it's going to be a messy divorce eventually. The question is it worth it for Colorado to get the national attention and hopefully have some big wins here and there in the meantime? But either way, I think you and I agree it's going to end badly, either because he's going to go somewhere else or because it's not going to work out and he's either going to leave, like you said, or he's going to be fired.
So Colorado gets more national TV games. Great. Than Arizona. Great. But the fact is that going to help players when Deion leaves in 2 years and Jedd Fisch is, recruiting up a storm at the rate he's going now? Are players going to go to Colorado when Deion is gone and they let one of his assistants take over and say, well, I coached under Coach Prime? No. That's why I wouldn't be a part of this. I wouldn't want any part of this circus. It is a Band-Aid solution, and I'm going to continue to bash it until I'm proven right. Okay. Next one, Shane. So last one, we'll touch more in the last segment on other things. But so I heard from my source, and I'll talk about more in the second segment about what I've heard from a TV perspective. But I heard that there was that the Pac-12 is cooling on conference expansion. So San Diego State, Oregon's not necessarily into it. Stanford is not necessarily sold on San Diego State's academics. So buy or sell that it's a good idea for the conference to stay at 10 teams for 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, my opinion, I'm pretty stubborn as far as changing my opinion, but it's a very fluid situation, and I'll go ahead and buy that. I would still, I think, long-term like to see Arizona go to the Big 12. I think that still would make the most sense. But for now, after talking with our friend Corey Leff, aka John Wall Street, last week, in an interview you're about to hear as well, it seems like staying at the Pac-12 makes the most sense for the time being. At least
you mean it's 10 teams.
As 10 team, yes, the Pac-12 and whatever they're going to be called after after UCLA and USC leave. They'll probably stick with the Pac-12 just like the Big 10 stick with the Big 10.
You got to go to the Pac-10. You have to. You
think
cannot.
So? Well, I'm just thinking about what the Big 10 and the Big 12 have done. I mean, those they're just.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. The Big 10 was smart. They rebranded as the B1G.
Well, yeah, but it's still. They're still the Big 10 though. Everyone's still calls it the Big 10.
Fine, but go back to the Pac-10. Just do it.
I don't think so. I think that's. I think they're just gonna stick with the name. They're gonna say, "Hey, it's a brand. This is the brand
that's a bunch of garbage."
Well,
okay.
I'm not saying what should be done. I'm just saying what I think is going to happen.
Okay,
but I think short term, yes, sticking together makes the most sense. Just for, I've got an education on just how big a headache it is to switch conferences. And I think that it does sound like, even though George Kliavkoff's been about, it's a good thing we don't have a deal yet, yada yada. I know he's got to say that stuff, but come on. But I'm more confident now, and part of that's based on the things that your source has said. Your source has been spot on, by the way.
Yeah.
What I've heard elsewhere, that there's going to be a good enough deal for now to lock something in for the next several years, and then reevaluate in a few years down the road. Yeah. So yeah, I will buy that for now. Staying together. Those 10 teams sticking together is the best option.
We'll talk in the third segment about Shane's buddy Jay Johnson pulling quite the move. But first, let's talk to our new friend Pat Crakes, who's going to break down the TV negotiations, including one important question: what does basketball play into a conference and television decision? You'll find out here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jed Fish and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, very glad to welcome yet another new guest to the program, Pat Crakes, who is a strategic advisor for programming rights negotiations, and formerly used to work in Fox Sports in programming, and which is an awesome background, Pat. So really glad to have you join us through our buddy Corey Leff, aka John Wall Street, for those of you who listen to the show frequently. So Pat, I've heard many rumors, obviously, about the Pac-12 negotiations. And I just want to throw out what I've most recently heard and tell me, do you think this would be a good scenario for the conference or a bad scenario? And I got this one from a source that I have. He says the latest is that Apple is still considered the front runner for the majority of rights, but Amazon is still at the table, as well as two other networks not named ESPN are back at the table. Number one, is that a good thing for the conference? And number two, who could those two networks realistically be?
All right. Well, guys, thanks for having me. And as a future member of the Wildcat family with my daughter in the fall, it's thrilling to be here. So just want to say that. So here's what I think. I think it's essential that the Pac-12 secure a distribution deal that has more than one distribution element to it. So that means something that has what I like to call the TriCast: broadcast/pay TV, and then streaming. So it's good to hear that they have streaming distribution, and that there are other networks involved, because it's essential to have those three platforms work together. Streaming simply isn't yet to go embrace a streamer fully is to accept a new idea about reach and its importance in the development of sports media. That may or may not be right for some leagues. That may or may not be the standard in 10 years. It's not today, regardless of what anybody tells you. Add a streamer. So there's complications. Thursday Night Football leaves Fox, goes to Amazon. Amazon does a great job with it. Viewing goes down 40%. That's for the NFL. Okay, so the NFL is the most important media content in the United States by far, and it declined 40%, right? MLS goes to Apple. Apple TV currently is seen by 1.5% of all, 1.5% of all video minutes consumed across every single platform is Apple TV. By comparison, secular declining pay TV and broadcast is 52%, right? It's in decline, but you can see that the comp, Amazon's at 3.5%. The standard bearer for streaming, Netflix, 8%. Right. It's like these numbers are growing, but they're small. So at this moment in time, it's good to have a mix. So I'm glad to hear all of that. The one thing I will say about the streamers, they're always in. Okay. So if you go back and take a look at Amazon over the past 5 years, you'll find that they've been spoken about coming hard for everything. And then at the last minute, they pull up. They didn't with Thursday Night Football, and they haven't with, but it's like that's normal for them. And Apple, in some ways, they're more, they're a little less like that, but you just don't know until you know. The narrative that the streamers were going to enter the marketplace for rights and outbid everybody has been proven incorrect. Essentially, what the streamers have done is they've taken what the established system doesn't want anymore. And what I think they've learned is that if the established system doesn't want it, they don't have to overpay, which also a media narrative was, well, they've got more money than anything, so why won't they spend? Well, guys, that's not how business works. You don't become Apple and Amazon by just, hey, here's a couple billion, guys. We'd love to do some cool stuff with you on our platform. I'm glad to hear about the networks. I think I think, it's a great question to ask. The Pac-12 has value in that 10 p.m. window. The deal that Larry Scott did with Fox and ESPN for the TV rights all those years ago was a very good one with Fox and ESPN, quite frankly. And a lot of the value that both ESPN and Fox were able to put into their models came from getting this 10 p.m. window that pay TV said, look, high quality college football on a Saturday night. That's a reason for people to watch us. That's a reason to have a pay TV bundle. We'll give you 10 cents a sub for that. We'll agree that your sub fee, 10 cents of that can go up, right? Because there's two conversations with pay TV distributors. One about the overall value of the channel when it comes to sub fee. And then there are some select properties that make up a certain component of that. And with that, if you're a pay TV owner, a channel owner, or a content owner, you can have more than one negotiation. So it's always really important to secure Pac-12 content's worth 10 cents. I'm making that up, by the way, guys. But it's something like that. Or the NFL's worth 60 cents or $1, right? Those are important things. So think about ESPN and Fox. The sub fee for ESPN, the sub fee for FS1 has some component of Pac-12 inside it that pay TV distributors have acknowledged, right? In ESPN's case, it may be less important, right? In the case of FS1, if they can secure, if Fox can secure some Pac-12 content, that may be something that they don't have to horse trade with a pay TV negotiator with. They've got a lot more Big Ten content coming in, so they'll more than make up if I think the Pac-12 left. But if they get to keep just enough that the pay TV distributor says we're not going to fight over that number we once gave you, well, so much for the better, right? Because there's really nothing else they would put on at that time. So I would suspect that possibly Fox is one of those. The other one is possibly NBC, who, and when we talk about streamers, right, you say Apple and Amazon, but remember, NBC has its own streamer and Peacock. ESPN has its own streamer and ESPN Plus. Paramount has its own, Paramount Plus, which is so as long as you get a little taste of USA or NBC somehow, you can accept a lot of your content being on Peacock. So I it could be NBC, and by the way, Fox has already gotten creative on broadcast television. In week 2, USC will play football at 10:30 p.m. Fox on the broadcast television network. So local news. So the times they are changing. Right. Local news is still very important to broadcast affiliates because they control the revenue for that. But at the same time, there's a lot of value in big time college football. And on a Saturday night at 10 p.m., why not get creative and program some windows?
So, Pat, and like Eric said, we appreciate you joining us. And we know you and our buddy Corey Leff are friends as well. And we had Corey on last week, and he suggested the remaining Pac-12 schools it might be beneficial for them to sign a maybe shorter term media rights deal so they have something locked in for at least the next couple of years. Then they could reevaluate once the college football playoff format is updated. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that could possibly be going on behind the scenes right now?
So when it comes to college football, and when it comes to all tier 1 sports, right? And define tier 1 as a property important enough that somebody will pay you a rights fee. They will give you guaranteed economics on a multi-year basis, okay, of which the Pac-12 definitely fits into. The next 3 to 5 years are going to be extraordinarily disruptive. The secular decline of the pay TV bundle continues apace. It's still very profitable. It still has 70 million homes, but because of the growth of TV homes in the United States are almost all coming from broadband only homes, increasingly pay TV and broadcast TV reach a lower percentage of all the TV homes in the United States. And the old system, the established pay TV system, was enormously profitable. It was a textbook microeconomic natural monopoly, not monopoly, natural monopoly. They're different. A natural monopoly is, without getting wonky, is like a utility. And pay TV had rate regulation, complete exclusivity, lots of content to offer. They could scale within a marketplace because of that, forced price increases, and forced 2-year contracts on folks, which eliminated churn, which is something you hear a lot about in the streaming era where nobody can force contracts on anybody. It's hard to scale at a price you need to make money, which is why all the prices for all the streamers go up. The content's fractionalized everywhere. And the truth of the matter is, the old system was a wonderful, wonderful economic engine for 30 years. Content costs followed it. It gets disintermediated by the internet. Streaming comes along and doesn't make any money. So the old system's content costs are still saddled on the new system's unprofitability. We've got a revenue cost mismatch. And that is coming to a head right now. So the next 3 to 5 years are going to be enormously disruptive. You see it happening with Disney. Disney's lost $11 billion in 2 years on streaming. Netflix has got about $14 billion in debt, and they make $2 billion in free cash. They're going to make an extra billion this year because they're not going to have to spend on content because of the writer's strike. But that's like that. That doesn't stay. And comparing that to some other media businesses, there's a station group called Gray TV. They make 1.2 billion in free cash. It's not like if Netflix is the example of what success looks like, that's not enough, okay, to sustain content costs. So this has all got to get settled up. There's got to be a lot of readjustments. People have got to figure out how to right size the digital size, how to milk the established side. So if you're a content tier one partner that gets rights, getting locked up and getting through that, I think, makes a lot of sense. And in the case of college football for the Pac-12, they need to keep themselves together to get past the college football playoff expansion, where I believe that also when some of these rapid disruptive changes get digested and all these costs from the last round of realignment get digested by the pay TV system, which includes streaming, there'll be an opportunity for expansion, realignment, alliances that will set a longer term value metric, but only after the distribution system's been sorted out. And right now it's really a mess. So to the point of long-term, short-term deal, that's a great question, because you don't want to leave money on the table because the system right sides itself and you have an opportunity. At the same time, you don't want to do like a 4-year deal and then find out that you're in the midst of a hurricane.
So, from Arizona's perspective, and because it sounds like they're they've at least talked to the Big 12, and maybe some other schools are considering the Big 12. Would it make sense then to maybe, assuming you can get a good enough media rights deal, and there's different definitions of good enough, would it make sense for Arizona then to stay with the Pac-12 and maybe try to bring a couple other schools in the mix along with the rest of the Pac-12, try to maybe San Diego State, a couple other schools, whatever that might look like? Or would it make sense, do you think, ultimately for Arizona to make the leap over to the Big 12?
Well, look, there's no room for expansion or moving. So any kind of movement that goes around is going to be a bad deal for the school that joins the conference. There's no economics to be gained from the pay TV distributors. It's important to understand that all the extra money that's going to come from realignment is coming primarily from pay TV, which is in secular decline. As I said before, streaming doesn't really offer you the same kind of economics, right? And the streamers aren't overpaying for this. And so the declining pay TV system has to take these realignments, and the media companies approach them and say, look, we've changed our complexion of our conference. We're tier one college football. We're one of the 5 reasons why people want to have a pay TV bundle. We want to increase. Well, the pay TV distributors who are in secular decline have to pass those increases on to their subscribers, right? So they'll do it for the biggest and best stuff, of which college football, Power 5, or whatever we want to call it, fits into very nicely. But there's only so much they can process. And a lot has happened already. The pay TV distributors are going to get up on the Big Ten realignment alone by Fox, by NBC, and CBS now. They're all going to want big increases within the Big Ten footprint and nationally. So that's just one example, right? The SEC is going to do it. Brett's going to go out and do it with the Big 12 because he's added some schools. He's going to try to show value. And the Pac-12 is going to do the same thing too. So when you talk about this realignment that could happen in the next year, it's unclear to me that you can even do that on a one-for-one basis. If Arizona were to join the Big 12, I think they would probably have to take multiple years of a lower share than the rest of the conference. So the opportunity cost of leaving your conference, unless you're forced to right now, is not necessarily the best if you're a school in the Pac-12.
And I just want to follow up real quick. This will be my last question, Eric. So just help me understand, because a lot of this is still foreign territory for me. If a media rights deal, would teams or programs be able to come in after the fact on this media rights deal? Or when they lock in a deal, would it just be, these are the 10 teams for however long this media rights deal goes for?
You can expand, but because there's only so much you can get from the pay TV system, it's very, very unclear, unless you're Notre Dame, that you're going to be able to turn around, your media partner's going to be able to turn around and say, and also this. Here's my list of 10 things: the NFL, the Big Ten, the SEC, redone Big 12, Pac-12. And I've thrown those at you, Mr. Pay TV distributor. Now, by the way, I added 2 other teams, and to keep the share equal, I need a little bit more. That's just not going to happen immediately. Teams that join conferences, I think, until after we get on the other side of the college football playoff expansion, will have to take lower shares than the members in the conference for a period of time. Well, I don't know if there's a heavy incentive to do that for anybody who's in the Pac-12. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't see that developing somehow, but even if they joined the Big 12, it would probably be for a lower share for a while. Maybe not, but probably. In the case of adding like a San Diego State or an SMU, they would probably most definitely have to join. But for them, in that case, as they position themselves on the other side of the college football playoff expansion, which, by the way, is a cost that has to be passed on to pay TV. I mean, pay TV sub fees and retransmission fees from broadcast retransmission pay nearly 100% of all the bills in media and 100% of all these increases coming for sports, despite its decline. That's one of the problems with keeping to expand and moving things around. You've got to digest this. So I certainly can see some schools coming in saying to themselves, and later on, this is going to work out well for us because there'll be another realignment or expansion. There'll be more money. The distribution system will be set. We'll be able to sort that out. So let's make this move up and take the lower share. But if you're in Arizona, that's a serious question you've got to ask. You've got to really kind of believe that the future of the conference you're currently in has no future. And right now, today, guys, I'll be honest, I don't see that at all, despite the problems with the TV deal.
So, Pat, from a basketball perspective, you're looking at it from college basketball, because a lot of Arizona fans, they think, football is what it is. I love football. I understand the value of football, but to a lot of Arizona fans, college basketball is what matters, right? Because that's Arizona's close to a blue blood. How much, from a television programming executive's point of view, as you have been in that role, how much does college basketball matter?
Little. 15, 20%. It's all about college football. So college football drives the value of the top conference rights. Basketball is great. So look, I went to Indiana. I was there when we won our last national championship. So did my wife. My daughter, Cassie, who just graduated from Kansas, they won a national championship, was there. So first of all, I just want to say, with Ella now at Arizona,
yes,
you guys are
bring us a title, please.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that basketball is important, but it isn't what drives the economics of these deals. It's football. And but now basketball is great to have, and it's a force multiplier, but it's very hard to swap those out. You just can't. The viewing levels of college football, and it's important. Again, going back to what gives value isn't always the viewing. It's, does a pay TV distributor think in this region or market, this content or this channel gives a viewer gives a customer a top 3 reason to have a pay TV bundle. And one of the things they have to do because of the decline in the pay TV bundle is remove any barrier between the consumer seeing value and the value of that pay TV channel, in particular for current customers. And that is football. And basketball is great and important. And Arizona is great and important, but it comes along for 20% of the value, and it's not the primary focus of the conversation.
And that's where I think fans need to realize, just a PSA here and listening to your explanation. football really matters. That's why we want to focus on having a really good football team, because as Pat just said, that's what TV executives, that's where the money is. Now, one last question from you about this, though. Two networks we didn't mention. If the Pac-12 were to make a deal with the CW and or Turner, is that a disastrous situation in your opinion?
No, as long as it's part of a mix, right? So first of all, Turner is as important a pay TV channel in the United States as ESPN is. So Warner Brothers Discovery, being partnered with them, you're great with that. In addition, I would expect that sometime in the next year or so, Warner Brothers Discovery is going to launch a streaming product in the United States. And that streaming product will look an awful lot like their successful streaming product in Europe called Eurosport, where they telecast the Olympics and other things on that. So they have the expertise to do that, and they probably will. So Turner's great. The CW is kind of a they're a fifth network. They program 2 hours of prime time a week. Sports is not something they're typically in, but they are a broadcast television network. And like I said, the signal goes out everywhere, but because of broadband only homes, a lot of these homes can't see it anymore. But still, broadcast reaches more than pay TV, and people watch the CW. So as long as that's part of a mix of other distribution elements, then you're fine. And I think it's all about the mix. At the very least, for me, the Pac-12 has to have some kind of presence on broadcast/pay TV to include the most important media companies. All right. And then the component of streaming, which can drive economics, is less important. Right. You're okay with the heavy streaming part of that if you've got several games a week on these important, highly viewed, the four broadcast networks and their media, their pay TV media, channels that accompany them, like Turner, right? And so if CW is a part of that, then that's fine.
What I would like to see, my last thing, what I would like to see is a mix between CBS and Turner, maybe a late night CBS, since other networks are programming there. CBS and Turner have that synergy from the NCAA basketball tournament. Just a thought there. All right, last question for you, Pat. Where can people find you if they have questions for you? Since we learned a ton, it's like we went to class, as I like to say, Shane and I did here. So where can people find you on the internet and beyond?
I'm tempted to say prison, but that's not really true. Though I think some people might say that. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. You can find me there, and also I'm probably I'm frequently quoted in numerous publications, including Corey's, about these things. So I'm not that hard to find. I'm also on LinkedIn, and if I have the time, I answer questions. People often don't like the answers. There's two groups of fans I've learned that don't like answers. The first group are the ultra soccer fans who, just have, and then the other is the ultra college football fans who you're passionate, know a ton about your game, care a lot, actually know more than the average bear about media, particularly sophisticated with it, but miss the nuances and things like that. And when you tell them something different, we're having some kind of argument. And I don't think we're having an argument. I feel like, it's like
Pat, if you're not having an argument on Twitter, then you're not really on Twitter, are you?
No, it's interesting, right? So I'm always happy to answer people's questions on Twitter. And if you don't like the answer, I'm sorry. But I will always try to do the best I can to be truthful as possible and answer a question if I have the time.
And they can find you at Aquinas82nd on Twitter. So, Pat, thank you so much for joining Shane and I. Just a lot of great info. I mean, you went deep, and I worked years in television programming for a local independent here in Phoenix. You taught me things I had never thought of or heard of before. So, great conversation, and we hope once the deal gets done to have you on again to recap it.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you for having me, and, bear down.
Great info from Pat Crakes. Really appreciate him joining us here on Wildcat Country. Shane, I was really, and I teased this earlier, the basketball part of it, where he said basically like what, 15, 20% of television revenue is basketball. Doesn't that kind of surprise you? Like, I got to admit, I thought it was maybe 35, 40. Really thought it was more.
I actually thought it from what we've heard from other guests that it was actually lower than that. So the fact that it's 15, 20% to me is, it is a positive thing. It's probably not enough to move the needle. Say, hey, we got Arizona basketball. Yeah. I mean, they're a big name, but and a great following, but it's probably not going to move the needle one way or the other in terms of the final media rights deal. But yeah, Pat was a great wealth of knowledge. There are certain interviews like where there's actually not a lot like where I want to go back and listen to it because I got it the first time around. I'm going to go back and listen to what Pat said because a lot of it's some of it was over my head. A lot of it made perfect sense, but as a
very detailed
information, everything you wanted to know and maybe then some. But yeah, I know it's all about football all the time, which is why Arizona's rise to relevancy is a very important thing at this time, and hopefully. Arizona will have at least as good a season this year as they did last year and keep the momentum going.
I just to revise a thought that I gave a minute ago, I would have thought that basketball was maybe a third of the rights and football was 2 when it came to that. So I was surprised that it was like a fifth, if that, a fifth or 1/6. So just something to keep in mind going forward, but fun interview with Pat. All right. So a couple things I want to touch on here. First of all, it turns out Mac Bingham, who was a pretty solid contributor to Arizona's baseball lineup, has transferred. And he has transferred to the defending national champions, LSU, which means Jay Johnson plucked another one, Shane. I personally, let me just say this at first. I personally don't have an issue with it. In this day and age, the way that the system is set up for transfers, coach leaves, I get it. And he stayed 2 years after Jay. He didn't win anything here. Yeah. I have no issue with this. I have a feeling you're going to think differently.
You're going to be surprised because I actually don't logically think differently from you. It's not really an issue at this point. It just sucks. It just sucks that because I still am not happy with the way Jay Johnson left Arizona. I feel that's fair. I feel a little bit better after some of his comments after the College World Series.
What did he say? I didn't hear that. Did he say anything about Arizona?
Well, he talked about his time in Arizona and how he really considered he still has like a group text chain with those guys and how he wishes he had gotten over the hump at Arizona and was glad he was able to at LSU. So, but I think the way he left the program and not acknowledging the program in any way on his way out, still I don't think it was the right way to go. As far as the Arizona transfer, Mac Bingham, I mean, it's to me.
He waited 2 years. Yeah.
Whatever unwritten rule is there, I don't think it's an issue now. I just, I tweeted about it. It's like, yeah, that sounds about right. Cause I'm just, it's just annoying. Okay. It's not unethical. No, it's really not. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of how he's just sort of, left the program in the dust, and it's just something I personally have to get over.
So the final question, and I saw a tweet last week, and it was great, and it had 4 play-by-play announcers. It had Keith Jackson, Brent Musburger, Ron Franklin, and Gus Johnson, and it said, "Which of these would you choose to call your team's game? If you could create a fictional game, an all-time Arizona team facing whomever." You could have one of those announcers and then one color commentator, national, not local. So Brian Jeffrey's off the table here. Who would you choose? I'm actually kind of curious.
One of my favorite guys is, again, and I like guys who are like not over the top. That's why Gus Johnson drives me crazy, but also guys who aren't just completely stoic like Joe Buck. Guys who are sort of in the middle, who can get excited when they need to be, but don't make it about them. He recently retired, but Vern Lundquist is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
he was in that category. Like he was a professional. He would strike the right tone when needed. You wouldn't always remember, like he wouldn't have usually have like very memorable lines, but I actually like that. He did what was needed and got out of the way.
He got to be a little too much in his older years of a caricature with, oh my goodness, and stuff. I mean, where he was trying to get those like. If you listen, I think when Arizona beat Notre Dame in the 80s, Vern called that game, and when you listen to the highlights, you can hear that.
They beat ASU, and it was at 86 in the
maybe he was calling that one. Maybe that was it.
That was when he said this. And the race is, and to my point, when he said the race is on, this is Chuck Cecil. When he's running the ball back, he said this is Chuck Cecil. and then silence. And he just let the play and the crowd do the talking. You didn't hear another word for another minute or so. Perfect. Great announcers know when to just sit back and let the magic happen. And he's one of those guys, and in terms of speaking of basketball, him and Bill Raftery were my favorite combination.
Oh, Raftery's the best color commentator in basketball. No doubt.
As far as a color commentator in football, though, I'm not really sure.
Okay. So there's two of them, and I'm going to rank them in order. I think Keith Jackson is the ultimate gold standard.
Oh, sure.
When I think of college football, it's Keith Jackson.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, the last Arizona game that he called was against his alma mater, Washington State. It was in Mike Stoops' first year of 2004. It was a game that I happened to be sitting out at the 50-yard line, the lower deck of the student section where there weren't very many people. And Arizona just needed to take a knee and the game would have been over and they would have won. But they fumbled and Washington State got the ball and threw a touchdown with a minute left. And I remember I taped the game. This was in the days of VCRs. And I went back and watched it in my college apartment. And Keith said, in all my years, I've never declared a game over. And then it changed. So that was his lasting memory of Arizona Stadium, I'm sure, in his elder years.
Kind of like Arizona and Washington in 2014 when Washington probably could have taken it. And Gus Johnson called that game.
Oh, I forgot about that. You're right.
Yep.
The other one that I like that I put number 2 is Brent Musburger. And we know I believe his last time at Arizona Stadium was 2009 against Oregon.
Wow, you've got a great memory with these things. But yeah, it had to be because him and Kirk Herbstreit called it for it was when game day was here. Yeah,
when with ABC. So that's the one I think. And unless he called, I think it was 2015. Did Chris Fowler? I think had already taken over there when they were doing the. I don't know if Herbstreit was there if they called that one. I'm not sure. But Brent, I remember, called the Oregon game, and they still play it at Arizona Stadium. Was a welcome to Arizona, or you are looking live
of course,
at Arizona Stadium. That's where Brent got it. And Keith was number 1 in my book, but Brent was a solid number 2.
I think Brent's a guy who probably should have retired another 10 years sooner. But
okay, that's fair enough. As far as the color commentator goes, I think Herbstreit is, for college football, best in the business. I mean, he's just established himself. He's so thorough. In the NFL, he's fine, but in college, he, for the last, almost 20 years, plus on College Game Day, he's had that seat. So I would put probably, I don't know, Dan Fouts or Bob Greasy and Keith, or Dan Fouts and Keith really stood out as well. So I know I'm not really answering my own question concisely, but there you go. Just a kind of a thought-provoking discussion. If you guys have any thoughts, either tweet us or put something on the YouTube page if you're watching on there. But we want to thank our new friend Pat Crakes for instructing us in a way about all of the TV rights negotiations. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.